Wednesday, January 25th, 2012, and this is Day 9 Daily number 407, where we learn to be a better gamer. Today's topic is going to be a Protoss-focused topic because I cleverly went back through the list of archive videos and saw that I had been so neglectful to you poor little Protoss people. Forgive me, when I was over winter break, played a lot of Protoss, so I perceived Protoss in my mind more frequently, but I haven't done any shows about it. So we're going to be doing... Yeah, you know what? I am going to go get him. Stay here. Stay right here. Stay right there. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce to you the gentleman who will be co-casting with me for the After Hours Gaming League, Rob Simpson. Am I allowed to say where you work?
Of course.
From Blizzard Esports. I mean, his face is known, but you may know him more for his voice.
That's where I'm supposed to talk?
Yeah, it's where you talk right then and there. Excellent. Now, Rob, yeah, you can comfortably sit there. That's where I keep all my dirty laundry, in that chair, and you can sit there because today we're going to talk a little bit about Grubby versus Sheth, and now Grubby makes my life...
relates to dirty laundry.
Yes, good. It's important to have smooth transitions in the midst of a daily. We're going to be talking a little bit about Grubby's brilliant decision-making on this game on Shakuras Plateau, and that makes my job quite a bit easier because... he's just so clever. So I did, of course, want to note that right after the Day 9 Daily, we'll be doing the After Hours Gaming League Week 2 cast between Zynga, the makers of the iPhone apps that I know that many of you play, and Epic, not the game company, but the medical software company. So, without any further ado, let's talk a little bit about ZVP on Shakuras Plateau while I reach over here and shut this door. And while Rob's head is just barely in frame from start to finish. Fantastic. So, God, this is perfect. I'm going to try not to look. I'm going to try to just cover my eyes and continue with the cast, being clever. In Protoss vs. Zerg, I always feel that there's a general theme of needing to put pressure on the Zerg early, whether it be with fast warp gates, whether it be with a very fast air play, which is the most common. There's some less common things like warp prism play, which is quite popular on Shakuras Plateau. But what interests me most is the way that Grubby takes his opening and then jumps right into taking a third expansion very quickly, which can help sort of dictate the action of the rest of the game for you. You don't have to worry as much about having a clear, clever set of timings because so much of your decisions already get made for you. We'll look a little bit about that as we hop right into this game. We have Grubby here who takes an early expansion. After he sees that Liquid Sheth has in fact not taken a gas geyser yet. He sees the spawning pool, sees no gas, and this is a little bit bold just because there are Zergs out there, and I know you're out there because I've played against you, who see a late forge and who take all their drones for your expansion and kill off your cannon that's building. And then the Zerglings arrive. And by I've played against you, I mean, I know you're out there, Liquid TLO, you jerk. Sending cannons over, trying to be Gosu. Whoa! Warp speed. Alright, a little bit loud, but now we get some of the usual timings at the start of the early game with this Forge Expand. If you aren't Forge Expanding, I recommend it. It will give you a much greater comfort throughout the game. Now, one thing that I'd like to note about this timing, a lot of people consider this Nexus to be, a super ultra macro style of play because we're not going for the Forge first. But one of the most important things is the fact that this gateway gets planted down at 3 minutes and 20 seconds. With this sort of timing, you're going to end up getting your warp gate up very quickly, or whatever cybernetics core tech that you want up very, very quickly. And I think that with most early expand builds, often this timing will be neglected. The earliest possible gateway. And Grubby, you'll notice, builds his pylon before the cannon. If you're going to go bold, baby. There are Zerglings out on the map right now, and this is another important component to that early game defense, just leaving that probe there. So that way, in the worst case scenario that Zerglings start wandering up, we can just warp in a Gateway, a pylon, something that resembles a building. Cool. And per expectation, we go ahead and get the assimilators up. But it looks like Grubby is instead favoring getting one assimilator up. Now, I want to talk a little bit about something that will pretty much always happen. One of two things. The first one is that your opponent takes a third hatch pretty early. There's one, there's two. Cool. If you end up taking 3 hatcheries very early on, I'm going to lump that into one category. Whether you're going for Zergling speed fast, Roaches fast, whether you're following it up with a fast layer, anything like that. We're just going to lump that into the 3 hatch category. On the other half, we're going to label it as the 2 hatch category. These are the people that wall in and make a whole bunch of Mutalisks, get a bunch of Spine Crawlers and go infester, players who suck and don't take a third ever. We're going to lump this into another category. What I want to focus on a lot in this game specifically is the people who take the 3rd expansion quite quickly, as we see Sheth doing. What we're going to see right here is an opening that Grubby does that forces Sheth down a certain path. You'll see this in lots and lots of games, but it's important that we're aware that we're going to silo our opponent down into a certain line of behavior. So right off the bat, we see Grubby, interestingly, only has a single gas geyser up. Very surprising. Almost universally, we see the 2nd Vespene geyser up. We get a good bit more minerals just by having those 3 probies, not mining. So there's one Zealot popping out. There's Zealot number 2 popping out. And it looks like Grubby is even trying to hide these. Grubby is going to do a pretty aggressive multi-step pressure. And by multi-step, I literally mean there's a step 1 and a step 2 and a step 3. There you go. Nothing too complex. First and foremost, with this Cybernetics core being chrono boosted non-stop once it finishes, we're going to get this done very, very, very early. Now, early, you can label as before 8 minutes. If you are getting it at like 8 minutes and 30 seconds, that's a really late warp gate. Let me rephrase that slightly. Grubby is going to be rushing for his warp gate. If you are rushing for a warp gate and you hit 8 minutes and 30 seconds, it's way late. A rushed warp gate warp in should finish around 8 minutes, and anything earlier than that is absolute insanity. It's awesome. And Grubby's going to be going for a very early warp gate. If, for instance, you spent all these chrono boosts on your probes, something like this, then I would label that as like 8:30 is a pretty typically timed warp gate, 8:30 to 8:45. Look at the aggressiveness that he's doing this with. Now, ordinarily, when there's these early pushes, one of the big components is to have this, +1 attack upgrade coming out very early, but you kind of need the 2nd assimilator to be able to do that, so Grubby's actually going for more of a delayed +1. And here he is building 2 more gateways. Now, because Grubby is insane with this timing of his warp gate, he can only afford 3 gateways with this build order. That's all he can actually afford. And in the meantime, for any of you who have not seen this build, I want you to know that this is one of the true standards of all standard openings in this matchup, is this really fast push. Now, ordinarily you bring 2 Zealots instead of 4. 1 or 2 Zealots, or actually 2 Zealots to defend this probe that's going to try to build a forward pylon, a big component of that. And right now we're seeing, oh, look at that, the warp gate research is finishing at 7:17. So early. That is the earliest freaking warp gate I've ever seen. It looks like he's 4-gating in PvP. He's gone bear shit, man. In the meantime, he is taking these double assimilators. He will take a 4th assimilator in a moment. But for now, what I want to do is I want to focus on the rush. And I want to talk a little bit about forcing while I do. One thing to note, Grubby's warp gate research is done right now. And he hasn't even built a pylon. So here he is doing the attack and the harassment. You'll notice that our +1 that ordinarily coordinates right with that warp gate finishing is quite late. So Grubby is able to do a whole ton of damage. Now, envision here for a moment if there were only Zerglings for this entire period of time. Actually, don't even envision it, because that's exactly what happens for Liquid Sheth. The reason that this push did not actually work out as well is because this pylon ended up being planted very late. I feel pretty strongly that the attack should coordinate with right when this pylon finishes. Because if we go to the Liquid Sheth cam, I want to walk you through the way that this game looked starting at, let's actually go to the 4-minute mark. Just so we can see the forcing from his point of view. You'll notice that he's just taken his 4th base at around the 4-minute mark. Having to not fly his Overlord into cannons, which can occasionally be a struggle if you're terrible. Getting his extractor up. You're noticing that there's not really that many drones that have been made. A couple Zerglings are popping out because Sheth is aware that some Zealots are coming in. A 3rd Queen's getting started. And let's see, we're just now starting Zergling speed. And right about, let's see here, right as we're taking the 2nd geyser, right now is when Warp Gate is done. Warp Gate is finished at 7:17. What this forces Zerg to do is to get an early Roach Warren before he builds his layer tech. There's been this increasing trend of Zergs feeling a little greedy, starting that layer very early, delaying the Roach Warren. Why would I spend 150 on a Roach Warren when I can spend 150 on a layer? Well, with this timing, it forces that to occur. If you do it properly, if you have the Warpins layered properly, just Zerglings can't stop it. Why? Because the +1 upgrade is done. Grubby's going super fast. Again, I'm envisioning 3 Zealots being warped in right now, and another 3 warped in when this pylon gets finished. There's a full minute between when the warp gates are done and when we can actually warp in units. So that's one thing that I guess I would say bugged me a little bit about this build. There was a slight inconsistency of coordination there, but nonetheless, what's been the effect of this push? Well, just go to the unit tab and it's pretty obvious from there. We have a lot of probes, and Zerg does not have a lot of drones. In fact, he has mostly units. Super cool. Super cool. Love that. Now, anytime your pressure stops, very easy. You just warp in 3 sentries, and now you're safe. Boom. Wasn't that easy? It is that easy. Nice. But we see a warp prism coming out from Grubby. And as I continue to talk, you're going to notice how many times I say, this excites me, and I think this is awesome. Grubby is getting doing some follow-up pressure with this warp prism. Ordinarily, what the Protoss player would do is be gearing up for some way to get a 3rd base, be gearing up for some normal mid-game, like Blink Stalkers with Immortals and Sentries, something nice and bulky. You know, I battered Zerg down in economy, so now I'm just going to go for a usual mix, knowing he has a bad economy. But Grubby is going to do this really cool follow-up. I want to just note right now how well all these things integrate together. This 3 Warp Gate was not very expensive to do. I was able to build this robotics facility while all this harassment was going on. It's pretty brave by Grubby to just abandon ship. But this is increasingly what Protoss players are doing more and more and more. They get these units right here for defense, and then they're immediately going to begin being aggressive with them. In a more basic sense, you see Protosses who get sentries, and then they will simply move forward and move back. They'll become active in the middle of the map. So, alright, cool. What goes well with Warp Prism Harass? That's right, getting frickin' Colossus. Aw, yeah. So look at this really simple maneuver that Grubby's doing. Killing off these Overlords by dropping the Warp Prism around in cute places. So, there's 2 things I want to note right now. For one, our opening, with all our Zealots, shut him down from being able to get a layer up, and from being able to get that many drones up. So suddenly, we know Hydras and Mutas aren't going to be on the map. We have freedom to get air, like Void Rays, Phoenixes, we have the freedom to get this Warp Prism. And notice how this Warp Prism is doing what I call guaranteed damage. Walking here and killing off this Overlord. Cool. With virtually any tactic, it's so easy to obsess about the big damage, the juicy kills. Like if you go Hellions, suiciding them in to kill off everything in his main. But here, we don't see Grubby trying to do a suicide play with the Warp Prism. He's incorporating some guaranteed kills with that. And of course, he will definitely poke and prod and try as best as he can. But in watching a lot of Grubby's games, he does a very cool thing, which is to exploit this left side of the map. I mean like really, really left, like this far side. Just warping in here, warping in on this little plank here, warping in on that little plank. And while all this is going on, takes this third expansion. Now, if you watch the camera that Sheth's working from, he has Zerglings here, he has Roaches here, a Spire. There's Zealots that are getting warped in, enough that he can still pick up and leave if he needs to. But this is a great little distraction tactic. Sheth is doing his smart play, taking an expansion. Well, if I'm defending, I may as well embrace that I'm the defender. But what I love that Grubby does is he just waltzes right up here and takes this expansion. What really can kill this off right now? Honestly, what could kill it off? Grubby has a nice mix that's going to be hard to hit until we have speed roaches, which we know we delayed from that early push. And this Warp Prism is being a pain in the ass anyways. Cool. And so now we take this spot. The one thing that I would say before we go ahead and take a brief break and then step into part number 2 is that with this right expansion that Grubby's taking, this is starting to be more popular in this matchup because with our Colossus we can easily defend from right here and then waltz up onto our high ground and shoot from our ramp. And then what happens if Zerg goes to here? Well, we can just waltz down behind the shrubbery back up again and also defend from that backside. I think this is really cool. Almost always Protosses are expanding here in this matchup because they can force field this location, and then this is just a giant pain in the ass. This area can be a little bit of a pain in the ass, but not if we're getting Colossi really, really, really quickly. I love it. So with that in mind, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to do part 2. Isn't that right, Rob? Part number 2. Yeah! Oh! I love dailies, you guys. We'll be back in about 2 to 3 short minutes with part number 2 of Grubby vs. Sheth. Woohoo!